Good morning, everybody. We're so glad you could come today. First of all, I want to encourage everybody to have one of the cinnamon rolls. They are from the new Scott's Diner in New Concord. And he just baked them fresh for us this morning. Sorry for those of you on television or watching this video that you don't get to join in and have a cinnamon roll. It's December 1st, and this is our monthly Coffee and Commerce meeting where we want to bring issues to the attention of our membership. And the issue today is human trafficking. I also want to mention, as you'll see on the sign, Brent Markley from Stratos Group, Wealth Stratos Group, is the sponsor for this particular meeting and is going to be sponsoring several of these in the near future. So we want to thank Brent for that. So today we're going to be talking about human trafficking. And this, as we learn more, we're going to find out it not only has social implication, but it has business implication too. So probably this is not going to be the first discussion that the Chamber tries to initiate, but it is the first one for us to start talking about it today. So I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Laube from United Way, and then Jen Westfall from Children's Advocacy Center. And we'll go ahead with the presentation, and we can have some Q&A later. Thank you.
Good morning. As Joe said, I'm Stephanie Laube. I'm with United Way of Guernsey and Noble Counties, and
I am Jen Westfall. I am the director of the Children's Advocacy Center here in Guernsey County.
And we're here today to talk a little bit about human trafficking, not only what's happening worldwide, but what's happening locally. And as you can see, there's more slaves today than at any other point in history. It is a $150 billion industry, so this is a business, $150 billion, and it's in all 50 states as well as throughout the world.
And when we include the number of slaves, we're talking both labor trafficking and sex trafficking.
Right. So what is human trafficking? It is basically someone who is being forced to either have sex or to labor against their will. It is either forced, it's through fraud, or it's through coercion. It can happen anywhere. And there's two kinds of trafficking, as Jen mentioned. There is the labor
with and
sex.
The force, fraud, and coercion, and I think we'll get into this a little bit farther in the presentation. Those are key words to Ohio's laws. That's why you're going to hear them over and over again, because there has to be a presence of force, of fraud, and coercion for it to be deemed trafficking. The only time where that doesn't have to be is when they're under the age of 17. Okay.
So you want to talk a little bit about the labor trafficking again?
Labor trafficking. Labor trafficking occurs everywhere. One of the most common things that you see, what was it, about a year ago, they did the nail salons in New York City, where people are brought into the country, they're promised their green card and their paperwork, they come in, they're forced to work. Sometimes it goes to the extremes of they actually live in their locations. Okay? Labor trafficking can be not being properly paid. Even if they have their green card and they have their papers, they may be being paid under the table for less rate. The Tampico organization in Marietta that runs the restaurants, probably about 9 months ago, they were prosecuted because they were failing to pay their employees the appropriate wage. That is considered labor trafficking. We also, one of the most popular ones that hit the news was an Ashland couple that was convicted of labor trafficking. They imprisoned a developmentally disabled woman and her child. They threatened her with snakes. They threatened her with dogs. They beat her. They locked her in the basement. And they did all of this so that when she filled her narcotics prescriptions, they could have her pills.
And that just happened?
That was just last year. Okay. Sex trafficking. And on here, you're going to see a lot of the under the age of 18. That's because as the Child's Advocacy Center, we handle minor or juvenile victims of child trafficking. But most of what we'll talk about even applies to the adults. So again, it's the commercial sexual exploitation of anyone, for us, under the age of 18. It could be monetary or it could be in kind. We've seen parents traffic their kids for a minivan. We've seen parents traffic their kids for rent. We've seen grandma needing bingo money, so she let men have sex with her granddaughter. Okay? It can come in all kinds. It doesn't necessarily have to specifically be what everybody pictures of human trafficking, which is a third world situation, dark, dingy, standing on a street corner, bars on the windows. That isn't what it is. The modern trafficking exists right among us. Okay? It can even be a situation someone can self-traffic. Okay? If they need drugs and they're selling themselves to get drugs. Okay? It's still, they even have what they call survivor, where they will go and they will traffic themselves for rent, for a place to live, it happens. Okay. To reach the trafficking, this is new, the AMP model. There has to be an action. Induce, recruit, harbor, transport, provides, or obtains. Then the force, fraud, and coercion has to be in place except for kids. The reason why they say it doesn't have to be in place for kids is because there was probably 3 years ago the laws changed, maybe 4, 3, I'd say, lose track of time. Because there was a statement that said, you have an age of consent. If a person can't consent, then how can they be aware of force, fraud, and coercion? You know, they kind of are opposites. You know, so if you have a child or a juvenile that can't consent to something, you're saying that they're aware enough to be aware of force, fraud, and coercion. So when it comes to juveniles, they have gotten rid of the force, fraud, and coercion end of it. Okay? So child pornography, that is considered part of trafficking. Let's see, the strip clubs, that's considered trafficking. Just online pornography, that now falls within the laws of trafficking. They've really changed them lately, and they're tightening them up. If an individual is in possession of child pornography, and they trade that child pornography, and they could trade it for additional child pornography if they're tired of what they have and they want something different, and they trade it. If they sell it, that is all now considered trafficking. It doesn't have to actually be the child. So they're really tightening up the laws and trying to come down on this. One of the reasons being is, you know we sit here on 77 and 70. We know that drugs come through here like crazy, at least they tell us, okay? They're moving to people, because when you traffic drugs, once you sell it, you have to replenish your supply. You can traffic the same girl or boy, because it happens either way, over and over and over again without having to replace your supply. So, and the other thing is, it's very hard to convict. It's very hard. We'll talk about some local cases later, and they were actually charged with human trafficking. A lot of times when you see these things, they aren't specifically charged with human trafficking, because a lot of times that requires cooperation from the victim and admission from the victim. And we'll get into some more details later about why that's such a big deal, why it's so hard to get that trafficking, clean trafficking charge. Okay, the key players that we have in trafficking is the trafficker, who is anyone that receives money or something of value for the sexual or the labor exploitation of another person. So grandma with bingo money was a trafficker. Mom and dad with the minivan was a trafficker. They would probably never call themselves that, and if you would tell them they trafficked, they would probably deny it, but that's ultimately what it was.
I think this next one is the one that most people don't think about, and if you look at it, I mean, this is a business model. These guys are in it for the money. It's business to them, and we don't always realize that those that are helping facilitate the trafficking are also a part of the problem.
In a lot of areas, particularly with taxi drivers, traffickers will have one particular driver or company that they work with a lot, and there's a kickback system to it. So if they stay quiet, they get a little bit of a kickback. So you will see that happen. Same thing with certain hotels or property owners. You know, they may know what's going on, and they're getting paid on the side to be quiet and to kind of support it. Okay? The buyer, anyone who pays or trades something for value, doesn't have to be money. Drugs, a car, free rent, food, it could be anything. If something has value and it's traded for sex or pornography, it is deemed trafficking. The victim, again, we're speaking of child. We say anyone under the age of 18. It truly is anyone who's falling victim to force, fraud, and coercion in exchange for something that's of value. And the key is victim. There's a judge in Columbus, and he runs what's called the Catch program. It's a Franklin County Municipal Court judge. And he discovered when he had women coming in for prostitution charges, their pimps or their traffickers would be with them. And he started noticing the dynamic between them and started noticing that it was very similar to domestic violence, like the reactions they had to each other, how they attempted to protect, how they wouldn't make an admission. And he had this light bulb moment where he realized that these prostitutes were not criminals, that they were victims. And so he started treating them as such, and he developed the Catch program. And depending on the severity of the situation, they may meet with that judge once a week, twice a week. And it gets them away from their trafficker. They get back in school, they get in counseling, and it has been extremely successful. It has turned into a model for the whole country where they're attempting to start these programs. Because people who are being trafficked, although they're participating in a criminal act, they're not the criminal, they're the victim, because they're not doing it on their own free will. And so that mentality has started to change a little bit, and so now we reference them as victims.
So what can you do? There's a couple of really easy things that you can do. One, you can help raise awareness through social media. What is happening today, actually, thanks to Mr. Markley and AVC. This is going to air for the next 2 weeks. So we're going to raise awareness in that way. There is a place on the web that you can go to. It's called Made in a Free World, and you're going to see a little video on that here in a few minutes that will actually help anyone who is a business owner track where your supplies are coming from, and then you're going to be able to actually see whether there's a high risk that there's some labor trafficking happening, and what you can do to start a conversation with your suppliers.
There's an interesting website. Do you have that on there about you go in and you answer questions about your lifestyle? Is it on here?
It's not. And well, there's at the end, there's a place you can go.
And it tells you how many slaves you potentially employ. I think I had like 14. Because it's based on the number of electronics you have, based on your cosmetics and where they come from, based on how many cars you own. Because we often think that, like, I mean, does it enter your mind that potentially purchasing this laptop, you maybe have employed labor trafficking? But when you look at all the different locations that our supplies and our products come from, there's very much the potential that we do. And that's where the whole free trade idea comes into play, and paying attention to that and kind of lessening what they call your slavery footprint, right? How much you are possibly contributing to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting site. You can also learn the signs, and you're going to learn the signs here today, what to look for. And an easy one, you can actually do it right now if you pull out your phone. You can text "End Slavery" to 51555, and you're going to learn more ways that you can actually combat the human trafficking. So I told you that there's a little
This is Eli. He is the owner and operator of Eli's Bikes, a medium-sized operation with gross revenues of over $5 million annually. Nice job, Eli. Eli considers himself a 21st century businessman. He cares about his customers. He cares about his workers. And he cares about the impact his business has on the world. Eli knows that forced labor and child labor affect his global supply chain, and Eli wants to do something about it. As we said, he's a 21st century businessman. No problem, Eli. We can help. Eli logs on to madeinaFreeworld.com and gets to work. He begins to input information about his business. Eli does not know the product code, so he simply types in the product, and we'll suggest the codes that apply. We've made it easy for Eli to upload the codes of his direct suppliers, OEM suppliers, and indirect suppliers. Eli is both a retailer and a manufacturer, so he can input different categories of spend and procurement. Each product code that Eli enters opens up stacks of data with detailed optics into risk of exposure to labor issues deep within his supply chain. Within a very short time frame, Eli has entered his entire enterprise's spend codes. Eli now has a proprietary and private dashboard with deep insights into his supply chain. Eli can push into different verticals of his supply management system to learn about potential issues with suppliers. He notices that his aluminum supplier has a higher than average exposure of risk. He simply clicks on the recommendation tab to learn how to engage with that supplier and remediate any conflicts with his company's values. Eli is now a leader of the free world. By using the Made in the Free World tools and following the recommendations, Eli is leveraging his purchasing power by turning his supply chain into a values chain. His customers know it, his competitors know it, and Eli knows it. Welcome to the free world, Eli.
Well, that's good.
Learning more about that, I have and you'll see it at the end, a website that you can go to, but I actually went in there and did a fictitious company just to see how it worked, so I would be happy to talk to anyone about it. But it's really a very easy way to at least recognize, think about where you're getting your supplies and the potential for the trafficking. And it's all, like they said, is proprietary, so you're going to have that information. Other folks aren't going to have it. And this was alluded to a little bit by Jen earlier, but Ohio ranks 5th in the United States for human trafficking. Toledo is the 3rd as far as U.S. cities, and it's the fastest growing criminal industry. What do you think the first, or it's the 2nd fastest growing criminal industry, sorry. What do you think the first is? Drugs, exactly. But I think that those...
They're catching each other.
They're catching each other.
A lot of times it'll go hand in hand because a lot of times when the girls are, or the boys and the women are kept, they are deliberately addicted to drugs so that they're willing to traffic in order to get their next hit of drugs in order to stop withdrawal. So they kind of meld together. Back to that slide where it said Ohio is 5th in the nation. Does that surprise anybody? That we're that far up there? Out of 50 states, we're 5th. And Toledo is the 3rd city in the United States. Okay? Out of all the cities that we have, of DC, of Houston, Miami, Orlando, Los Angeles, Toledo in our state is 3rd. One of the things we forget, not just with our location here with 70 and 77, but you have 70 and 77, you have 80 running across the top of the state. Okay? You have all of these state borders that so quickly someone can be across our state and in another. And then we often forget that technically we have an international border to the north. And not only that, it's a water border. Those are all things that just kind of makes Ohio a great spot for stuff to happen. And Toledo being where it's at, so close to the international border and close to 80 and close to other state lines, it also makes it a great location.
What's the number 1 city in the
You know what, I can't tell you that. I'd be inclined to assume that it would be like New York or Miami.
Was it Tucson?
So it's got somewhere near a border, I picture near a border where there's an easy in and out. So, but
those rankings based on?
Every state, human trafficking probably came really rushing to the front about 5 years ago. And at that time, all these organizations within the United States, we report, like as the CAC, we report. Every CAC in Ohio reports. There are human trafficking task force that have now been attached to money. And so to get your money, you have to report and support these statistics. And they all just get filtered through at the national level and reported out. We report quarterly anything we encounter.
There's also,
in Ohio, it's the Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force that does it through the Ohio Governor's Office. I don't know what the national one would be because all of our stuff comes filtered through the Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force. And that's the Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force.org. is where you can get all of that information. And they will have the local statistics down to the counties, the state statistics, and the national statistics. One thing about Ohio being ranked 5th, one of the things that makes us ranked higher, I mean, we do have it here, and it is a problem here, but we are one of the most efficient reporting states. Ohio tends to be, hard to believe living here, but Ohio tends to be where things start. And so we are one of the states that has done the longest amount of effort, the longest amount of reporting. And so that tends to keep us a little higher. As more states come on and get more efficient with their reporting, we may fall down the line a little bit. So.
There's also, the president started a cabinet on human trafficking, so they have gathered a lot of information, actually put together a report that is being looked at, so some of those numbers come from there. There's a whole section on recommendations, so those are all starting to come to us and to others.
We all have government protocols. I know the United Way joined you guys really started getting into it, what, last year?
We started getting into it a couple of years ago. Because Brian Gallagher is a part of that cabinet for the president.
But we all do that national reporting. The CAC is part of the National Children's Alliance, which is our national accreditation. And we not only report through our state, but we report through them. And it's said that the typical age is 13. You can approach schools and say that you want to talk to kids in the 7th and 8th grade about this, and people panic. You know, you're going to talk to our kids about human trafficking. But the fact of the matter is, they are the key age. And so they're the ones that need to be spoken to about this. You know, when you are on Facebook and you see runaways and missing kids and everything, and I know I'm often told to look outside my box, because when you work in this, you tend to think that, you know, everything's related to it. But I can't help but think, are these missing kids being taken? You know, do they meet someone online, believe they're falling in love? And we'll get into that a little bit later about how they get them into it. But so now when I see those missing kids, I can't help but think about that, because kids they're getting better about social media, but there's still some immaturity and some naive thoughts around social media and how dangerous it can be.
So here's some red flags. Jen already alluded to some of these, but some things that you don't think about is tattoos. Okay? They're actually branding their product. So when you see names or some unusual symbols, that could be that child branded, that person, that woman branded. Drug and alcohol use, again, a lot of times in order to keep them under their control, because it's all about control, they will addict them to drugs or alcohol. I'm not going to read all of these, but if you see somebody and they pay for everything with cash,
with a large amount of cash,
they're never left alone. So a woman goes in the hair salon and they are never left alone. That's on the back of your mind.
When we went
something to look for.
When we went through the key players and talked about the trafficker and the buyer and the facilitator, there's one that I did have on there and we took it off because the slide was really wordy. But it was called the bottom. Okay? The bottom is the top girl or the top lady. She's like the mother. She is the one that has the closest relationship with the trafficker, and she ensures that all the girls and boys are kept in line, and that if they go to hair appointments, if they go to get their nails done, that she is with them. She is their mom, and she ensures that they stay in line. One of the key things on here is the not knowing where they are. And you think, how can someone not know where they are? Well, back to the Facebook thing, when you see the missing girls, that missing girl might be missing from San Diego. So she could very easily, in a matter of a day, be in New York City. And they will move so frequently that they won't know where they are. So that's a key question, that if you see someone and you're concerned, ask them where they're from. Ask them if they, you know, how do you like our town? Have you been here before? Because they don't know where they're at. That means they've moved a lot. Okay? So that's key. They truly, when we link this, they have a whole underground system where, let's say they have a group of girls. One of the most popular things, Poor Melissa here. One of the most popular things is the Arnold Classic. I remember when I told you this, you were like, ah! Is the Arnold Classic, okay? That is one of the major things in our country that causes traffickers to move girls, and they ship them into Columbus, okay? The presidential conventions that we had the Democratic National Convention here in Cleveland, the Republican was in Philadelphia. How many girls do you think potentially went through here on these interstates? They will ship these girls to meet demand, and they will send them to wherever there is a need. So that's why it's key about and boys. We tend to always say girls, but it does include boys, and I try to catch myself. But that's why it's key when they don't know where they're at, because they could be in a matter of, 3 cities in 2 days. I mean, they can move that quickly.
Or they have inappropriate clothing for the weather. That was one that I didn't think about, because I would see people and they're in winter coats, it's 80 degrees, and think, well, that's kind of strange. Well, they may have just come from somewhere where it was 20 degrees. So, and the Super Bowl, I was just having a conversation with somebody in this room earlier before we started. Super Bowl is another place where you're going to see a lot of that human trafficking happening.
Yeah, they ship them to meet demand. And if they know that people are closing in on what they're doing, they will ship them out as quickly as they ship them in. And so that's why it's very hard to rescue some of these girls.
So we talked about control briefly. There's the physical control. They control their movement, they control their money. Okay? So those are key. The other is the psychological control. Okay? These women, boys, girls have to ask permission to do anything. They have to ask permission to take a shower. They have to ask permission to use the bathroom. So they are psychologically controlling them. Again, there's the drug control, there's deprivation of sleep. All decision making is taken out of their hands.
And when we spoke earlier and I said it was hard to get the actual charge of human trafficking applied to a case, the reason why is kind of, well, it ties into this as well, that control, that psychological control. They believe their trafficker loves them. Or the trafficker will even go as far as to have a child with them and withhold the child as a threat. You won't see your child, I'll take your child away. And so they don't necessarily see themselves as being trafficked. So it's very hard to get that cooperation from a victim to really hammer home that trafficking charge. I think we're getting better. I think they're getting more accepting and more understanding about it, but it's hard to get that victim to actually say, because she wants to protect. Okay? They threaten their family. They're in love with the trafficker. A lot of times, particularly juveniles who get involved with trafficking, they have not had the best history at home. A lot have already been raped, a lot of them have already been abused, sexually abused. So they may have a history with law enforcement and our social systems, and they don't trust. So sometimes they won't believe that they're actually going to get help. They won't believe that they're going to be viewed as a victim. They believe that they're going to go back into the system, they're going to get in trouble. I can survive better here. They truly believe that they're independent and they're doing what they want to do, even though they aren't. Yeah. Okay? They threaten their loved ones. Remember, I know where you live. Remember, there's Teresa Flores. She's out around the Dayton area. In the 70s, when she was in high school, she got pulled into human trafficking. And when she would try to push away, they killed her dog. She would walk home from school because hers was unique in the fact that they didn't take her away. They threatened and held stuff over her head. And so she would sneak out at night to do what they needed her to do so that it would protect her family. And so during the day, like, she would go to school. Her parents just thought she was going through puberty because she was still home, but she was being trafficked from the home. And like, she was walking home from school, they would drive beside her really slow in a car just so she knew that they were watching her. And they used that control and that fear of hurting her family. And they have no money. A lot of times there's no resources to get out.
And I think part of that too with the control is there's that embarrassment and that shame, and that's changing a little bit because of the judge, they're now being viewed as victims. But there's that shame, you know, they get into this, and at first it starts with an older boy. I'm his girlfriend. Oh, then it moves to, if you love me, you're gonna have sex with this person. And the next thing you know, they're in this system and they don't know how they got there.
Sometimes it'll even start, particularly with the older ones, you know, 18 and older, it will start with, we need money. Got you a really good job waitressing at this gentleman's club. You're just gonna waitress, don't worry. And they start waitressing. And then it's, you could make more money if you danced. You could make it, and it builds from there. Okay? Because a lot of times people are like, how do they just suddenly convince this girl to have sex with these people? Sometimes it's as subtle as start out as waitressing. That's why they say when you start looking at strip clubs and everything that they support this effort. Even if trafficking isn't happening within that facility, it can be a doorway to it. Oh, our local cases. August 8, 2014 in Washington County, Xavier Freeman was arrested because he had women with him from New York City in Washington County trafficking them. Again, the movement. Okay? He was actually charged with trafficking, compelling prostitution, promoting prostitution, and possession of a Schedule II substance. March 2015, Zanesville, 46 counts, okay, including human, he have it? Yeah, 3 counts of human trafficking, unlawful sexual conduct with a minor, drug trafficking. See how they kind of go together? So, and if you think about that, we are right in the middle. So it is here. It is here. Okay.
So this is a little bit about what United Way Worldwide has been working on. In addition to working on the President's Cabinet, there's a cross collaboration between people and organizations globally. There's the public and political will involving policy making efforts in the U.S. and globally. And then there's solutions at both the global scale and at the community level. As I said, we really started looking at this more closely a couple of years ago when the word started coming down from worldwide that we can make a big impact. There's 1,800 United Ways across the world, and each of us doing the same thing, combating human trafficking, is going to make an impact, and it's going to be a huge one. So we're really uniquely positioned to do that.
In 2013 is when the Ohio governor came forward and said that he wanted to give this money to CACs to serve juvenile victims of human trafficking. There's 88 counties in Ohio, and there's 24 currently accredited CACs. So not every county has a CAC. Believe it or not, Cuyahoga County does not have a CAC. They're in the beginning stages of implementing one. The money was distributed based on population, so the more people you have, the more money you got. And we've been getting that money. We have developed protocols in responding to victims of human trafficking. At the CAC, for those of you that aren't familiar, when we have kids that come forward with allegations of sexual abuse, okay, they're brought to us. We have trained forensic interviewers that interview the kids, ask the right questions without being leading, record it, so hopefully it's the only time the child tells their story. Ideally, law enforcement's there, victim advocacy, which is typically the Haven of Hope, and a mental health agency is there for a referral for mental health services and also in case we need them. So to give us that money and say, okay, when we have child victims of trafficking, you take care of them. It was kind of an easy fit. It was an easy way to do it without reinventing the wheel. Our biggest challenge when it comes to serving a victim of human trafficking versus a child who's just a victim of child sexual abuse, housing. You know, typically they're not from the area in which they're rescued. There may not be a lot of housing resources for juveniles for housing. And then transportation, trying to get them home. So those are pretty much the 3 additional barriers we face when we deal with victims of human trafficking. At the CAC, we do the interview, we have the team, we can do referrals for medical exams, and hopefully they walk out of there feeling like they're safe and that they're being taken care of. locally here, if we have an adult victim, Haven of Hope. They do the adults.
So a couple of things that we teamed up on 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago?
2 years.
Was to get a local public service announcement, social media campaign done. So we used our young professionals, and we were actually able to go into a Noble County school. The other schools, as Jen alluded to, really weren't comfortable with us going in and talking to the students about human trafficking, but we did have one school who agreed. So we used those students as well. We educated them, and then they worked with our young professionals to record PSAs. ABC was wonderful as far as broadcasting those, and it was really just an awareness campaign. We also had a mobile billboard. That's one of our young professionals with a mobile billboard. And so we had that at a couple of different parking lots in the area, as well as in Noble County. And then one of the things that we did that I think was really key is we went to the hotels, we went to the hair salons, truck stops, bars, and we tried to educate them, because they're the ones that are going to be seeing this movement happen.
And the hotels were amazingly receptive to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We gave them, I wish, do we
I
have
have
one?
them.
Yes, we have one.
We have these, and a lot of folks look at these stickers and are kind of like, wow, those are harsh.
Pass those
But
around.
the fact of the matter, this is Ohio's campaign. This is what they developed to be their campaign. On the billboards with this one, we had that taken off. There's a girl standing next to it, and she just looks very tired, and she's probably about 10. And there's this man's hand on her shoulder that's this really big, dirty, weathered hand. And it just, ooh, I give myself chills thinking about it. It's just a very intimidating billboard. But this is part of the campaign that the Ohio Human Trafficking Task Force put together, that no one should be sold for sex. Okay? And there's also a trafficking side to it as well.
So we asked, I don't know, we asked the hotels and the truck stops to put those up. One of the few places where the girls are possibly left alone is in the bathrooms. So we asked them to put those on the mirrors in the bathrooms or something along those lines. So if they have that few minutes that they're alone, they can see that and possibly text for some help.
And one of the things we made sure of was when we developed these stickers and we put this number on here, when that number is called, they will get a human. We did not want one of those things where it tells you to refer back to your local resources. So there is a human that will answer this phone 24/7. They speak multiple languages. So no matter where the victim is from, they can get someone that understands them. And then even the texting line has somebody on it 24/7. There are people sitting waiting for a phone to vibrate with a text message, but they're there 24/7. Because that was key for us. I didn't want, you know, when you think about a victim and they finally are alone and they finally get brave enough and they make that call and then they get met with a recording that tells them to call someone else, that would be horrible. But so 24/7, there are humans on this phone.
Jen, do you know, is it just Ohio, but I was told that hairstylists have to take
Yes.
a training?
I was going to get into that. That's expanding. In Ohio, now salons, any licensed beautician, cosmetologist, for their license, they have to get training in human trafficking. And they actually trained the CAC directors to do the training, but the majority of folks, because of the wonders of the internet, they do their training online. But the reason why they do that is because that, again, is one of those key moments when a girl might be alone. You know, she may have either the bottom girl or even the trafficker bring her in, but there's movement when you're washing, when she's getting her hair washed, when she's getting her hair cut, and they will go there because they need to look good. If they're going to sell them, they need to maintain them. So they're going to take them to the nail salons, they're going to take them to the beauty shop. Okay? So they're all now trained, because that might be the time where they get an opportunity to ask for help. And a lot of them have signs up that they support, you know, that they're working against human trafficking, that they've been trained. Another key that they look for when it comes to the salons is if the trafficker or the bottom girl is with them, huge pile of cash. If there's a big pile of cash that they whip out to pay for services, that's a pretty good indicator. Or if they're never left alone. Everywhere the girl goes, if they follow.
So probably you're getting to this, but here's a girl getting her nails done or getting her hair done.
What do you do?
And well, then what happens after? I mean, they text or they call, but because they're so on the move all the time, how quickly can something be done, and can they find? I mean, how do the local people? What happens?
Do they just call and they say, "Oh, great, you called, but we can't do anything"? We get a lot of like, "What should we do?" And what you should do if you encounter a girl is to call that number, because they will then alert the local authorities and they will come and they will get her.
So that's what would happen. Someone would locate our.
They would keep her on the phone while they would reach out to local law enforcement, because like putting these on the back of the bathroom door or in the mirror in the bathroom of a hotel room, at that point in time, it's just her and the buyer. She's away from the trafficker. That's the idea behind this, is that they're only going to make that call if they're away from them. Okay? So hopefully when they call, they're in a situation where they can stay there long enough that someone can get to them. And it may take them calling 2 or 3 times before there's an opportunity for them to get away.
Well, they might be able to track that number, track that on your cell phone.
I was wondering.
And like when we went and we talked to the hotels, it was like, what should we do? Don't ever interfere, especially if the trafficker is there. You just call for help, let someone know. Take down a license plate number, take down a description of the vehicle, take down a description of the people who is with the girl and the girl. Try to get some kind of identifying information that you can then let the authorities know in case they do leave before someone gets there. But don't ever interfere. So.
Most of these girls have cell phones, I guess would be my question with it.
They do, in order to keep track of them. When they go to be with the buyer, they will have a phone that belongs to the trafficker so that they can call. It's the control thing. They have to be able to be found. If they didn't have a cell phone and the girl would choose to run, so it has to be that fear, that control, and they have to maintain contact. So typically they do. Other things they might have are lots of business cards. So if you see someone with a lot of cash, a lot of business cards. Because they'll carry a lot of business cards for cab companies, for different things. So they'll carry a lot of business cards.
So here are some websites that you can go to get information. There's the one that Jen had talked about, the humantrafficking.ohio.gov. That's a great one to learn what's happening here directly in Ohio. There's Made in a Free World, if anyone wants to see not only...
The Polaris Project and Shared Hope are 2 really great national organizations that track and educate on human trafficking. They are just huge resources for information.
And then there's our information as well.
And we haven't talked a lot about the signs and the things to look for with labor trafficking. We always tend to get sucked into that to the sex trafficking. When you're looking at, do we have any more slides?
That's it.
Okay. I didn't know if I had to talk about something else. When you look at labor trafficking, say you go to a nail salon, say you go to an ethnic restaurant. I hate to put that stereotype on there, but if the staff continually turns over, like you never see the same person each time you go in there. Like it's always like there'll be these 10 people working, and then a month later there'll be an entire new set of 10 people. That's one of those signs to look for, because they're being brought into the country and they are committed to a certain amount of work before they get their documents and are truly free. Not every situation is like that, but that's one of the key signs. You may have a family that's just working on getting their family here, and so they keep cycling through on work visas. But that is one of the signs to look for. I think it was in Columbus, they just did a massage parlor. Talk about a stereotypical stigma. A massage parlor, it was like a local chain. They had like 6 different locations, and it was all trafficking. It was just a front. It was all trafficking. So just awareness. And like we said, don't interfere, call. You call this number not just for sex trafficking, but also for labor trafficking. They will still help for both. So
Is that just Ohio or is that everywhere?
Yes, that's Ohio. It's Ohio.
Girls get in at age 13 or boys get in at age 13 or younger.
Mm-hmm.
The question is, when do the traffickers decide they're no longer, they don't need them any longer, or they get too old, or is there any point in which
I don't think there is.
Stop trafficking?
Oh, I don't know. You know, I don't know if there's a time when the traffickers are done with them. I suppose it is based on demand, age, what people are asking for, sadly, as cold as that is. I figure they age out, and
then they can also become the person that lures
they can move up in the
child.
rank.
I mean, it's kind of, it's
they
a business.
become a bottom. Didn't know you'd know that term when you left here, did you?
Well, what about what do you see as far as all the pregnancies that come out of some of this?
What do you mean?
What are they? How are they? Are they aborting them? Are they?
A little bit of both.
I mean,
they, you know, there's no set pattern. They could force them to abort them. That's talked about, but then they also can make them have the child because it's then used as a control issue. Some get them pregnant on purpose so that they have something to control them with.
Well, I'm thinking from one of their clients. Maybe
Oh.
as a result of their client.
I figure they would abort them. Yeah, and that's another one of the key places that need to be aware and educated are like your local family planning and your Planned Parenthood clinics. Where you don't have to have like a pre-existing referral from your physician or whatever for treatment, you know, because they're going to take those girls in there for birth control pills, for STD testing, to pick up free condoms, to do that kind of stuff. So those clinics are key. So again, they will be alone. I don't think there'll be someone in the exam room. I don't know, they may, depending on how controlling they are. But anything else?
Locally in the news, there was the mom that came up missing and they found, and it said she was branded. Do we think that that's probably connected to human trafficking and she got away?
I'm guessing if she was branded, that would be a telltale sign. So, yeah, I would say they will either brand them with tattoos or they'll burn them so that they have a scar branding. And a lot of times it's around the neck and the shoulder area is where the branding is located at. So, could you imagine, there was a girl, she was rescued and she had her trafficker's name across here, okay? There was an organization that stepped forward and paid to have that removed, because not only would it be, you know, a barrier to employment and different things like that, but could you imagine, and it was backwards so that when she would look in the mirror, I mean, could you imagine escaping and every single day you looked in the mirror, you saw this man's name? And so an organization stepped up and had it removed for her. So, but it couldn't, you know, I have a cousin's cousin. You know, I'm not related to them, they're on the far side. They live in California. Their daughter, at the age of 13, went missing. In a matter of 18 hours, they caught up with her in Kentucky, and they were headed for Toledo. She had met a man online, and she had finally agreed to meet him. And she did. Because one thing, for all of you that have kids in your life, and I have this conversation with mine all the time, I say, unless you can do this, they're not a friend. So many of our youth today, if you talk to them, especially ones who have gone out and met someone that they met online, they're not meeting a stranger. They believe that these people are their friend because that's how they make friends now. You know, so, you know, they could have somebody that they just chat to on a video game. They believe that person is a friend. So when that person says, hey, come meet me in the park, they don't think that that person is a stranger. So educate kids on what truly makes a friend. I mean, I could terrify you with social media apps that are out there. My poor son doesn't have a chance. You know, there are apps out there that they can get on their phone and they touch it and it shows them within a mile radius who is around there that's also willing to talk. And then they meet up. Hey, could you imagine, my son's about to be 14. I cannot imagine, of course he'd never be anywhere like that without me, but sitting in a coffee shop at the age of 14 and finding out, oh look, there's somebody that has a common interest for me and wants to talk and they're less than a mile away. they can come meet me at this coffee shop. And
So
then
there's a way to block those, but there are new ones coming up
Yeah.
all the time.
And there's
So
ways for
just
kids
be
to hide them.
aware. I mean, know what's happening with your child and that cell phone,
Mm-hmm.
especially if they're, 12, 13 years
Mm-hmm.
old. I know 9-year-olds who have cell phones. We need to make sure, and it's necessary, but we need to make sure that we know what it is that they're doing and what they have access
And
to.
it goes beyond the obvious apps. I had an acquaintance whose son was playing the Clash of Clans. Remember when that was really big? And it got to where you could chat in the side column with people who were on your team. They swapped emails. And then the emailing led to wanting phone numbers. And his mom found out about it. And when she called the phone number, an old man with a foreign accent answered, not the kid that was playing Clash of Clans. And he said, it's not what you think. And she says, oh, I know what it is. And she hung up. So, and you think our kids are smart enough. My son is involved in Civil Air Patrol, and one of the kids in his unit, because I did a social media presentation to them, he admitted that he went to the city park and met one of the people that he played Clash of Clans with. His mom was in the back of the room. She about came unglued. She said, what did you do? You think your kids understand, and you talk to them, but you really have to be vigilant because that social media is one of the easiest ways that they lure the kids in. And there's different layers to it. People think, oh, how do kids end up in this? There's a video that we use a lot called Chosen. And the reason why it's called Chosen is because that girl, when she talks, she will tell you, I was chosen. She was an honor student, a cheerleader, and she was going to college while she was in high school. She worked as a waitress at a local diner. And this is how this system works. That you wonder how kids get in it. This is a good example. She worked in this diner, and this older gentleman would come in 2 to 3 times a week and always sit in her section. And he talked about his wife being deceased. He struck up a conversation with her, talked about going to college, talked about what she was studying, where she wanted to go when she was done with school, what her interests were. This went on for a couple months. Okay? Lo and behold, in walks this group of 20-somethings from the nearby college town. And one of them started talking to her. And amazingly, they had the same interests. He lived in the town that she wanted to live in, and all this stuff. And so he started coming back and visiting her, and then he asked her out. And they went out on a date. And then they went to that town she just dreamt of living in, and she didn't come back. Okay? So there is that much effort. There's a book. I think you have it right now.
I do.
What's it?
I knew you were going to ask me that.
The title's eluding me.
I can send it.
It would
I'll
terrify
send it
you
to
as a
Jill.
parent to read this book. But it talks about one of the key situations in that book was a group of girls were at the mall. And the one girl kind of felt left out. And she was behind in the crowd. Well, lo and behold, this boy came up and talked to her. And she was just beside herself. They traded phone numbers. She called him. They talked on the phone. And this is one of the things they look for when it comes to a victim of trafficking. They want to be able to fill a void of something that girl is missing. So this girl hated her parents. So he fed into, oh, they don't treat you the way you should be treated. You're much more mature than they make you out to be. Oh, I can't believe they didn't let you do that. And they give them that support that they feel like they're not getting somewhere else. Well, eventually he convinced her to come meet him just to go out for an evening. So she took the bus to a different part of town and met him on a park bench. Well, when the car pulled up, it wasn't him. It was a different guy. And he said he was going to give her a ride. She was in Atlantic City before the night was over on a street corner, getting ready to turn tricks. The guy she met in the mall was not the guy she talked to on the phone. The guy on the phone's sole job was to know how to talk to these girls. Okay? And then the guy that picked her up, he was the guy who transported. So every time she encountered what she thought was this guy she met in the mall, it was a different person. They all had a job. So when you think about how do kids get sucked into this, they're really tricked. They are fraud. Okay? And that's where it comes from. So you really need to talk to kids and let them know that even if it presents and looks safe. If someone is not, like I said, if you can't walk up and smack them, then they're not really a friend.
And it's not just kids.
No, it's not
women
kids.
too. It's that they play into that insecurity. They play into that what's missing in my life. So.
One of the adults, you know, you suddenly meet this great, wonderful guy. He babysits for your kids. He picks them up after school. He cleans your house. He, you know, they just work their way in, and they fill that void. And so it creates that relationship feeling.
Jen, the story you shared earlier about I say the girl in the diner, I don't know how old the girl was, but I have a friend whose daughter was in the exact same scenario, except it sounds like hers worked out better. But big tipping, that kind of grooming process, and then with her, they actually moved out of town and then out of state, but they would send her home periodically. So then your family's not as suspicious. And she would go home and collect things possibly to take and sell for money, or go home and collect items, or spend the weekend with her family, and then just disappear randomly with no explanation.
Yeah.
So they were still giving her that contact, but the mom was, you know, at least in tune to the signs and knew exactly what was going on.
How the girl in the video was saved was when she went to the city to be with him, she took her dad's car. And he demanded that she bring it back. Well, when she brought it back, they had a woman who had been a victim of trafficking and had been rescued, plus her family and friends at the house, and they wouldn't let her leave. And it was talking to the woman who had been a victim, saying, open your eyes, see that this is what's going on, because she was still in that, he loves me, he's taking care of me, even though she was working as a stripper. You know, he loves me, he's taking care of me. And it took hearing someone else's story and making her relate it to what was happening to her that she realized, because it's hard to convince them that they're being trafficked because they just think they're in this great loving relationship. Crazy, isn't it?
You said you're not, at this point, able to get into all the schools that you'd like to, but what was the experience like talking to the one school that you did get into?
We got into Shenandoah.
Did they get it?
We were at Shenandoah, and that's where my child goes, and so it was kind of like, you can talk to him, you know. So, and I have a good relationship because he's there with the principals, and so they were willing to let us come in. We've done a few things down there to discuss human trafficking. Yeah, I think they get it. I think they get it. We had the Internet Crimes Against Children people last year came down, and they were at Noble Local and they were at Meadowbrook. Those were the schools that let them come in. And ICAC is based out of Columbus, and their sole job is simply to investigate crimes against children. And they came down, and at that point, the kids really got it, because here it wasn't some local person telling you about this stuff. It was detectives who said, we will come beat down your door if you share sexting images, if you share, you know. And so I think then they got it. I think they got the risk because it was people who had power to put them in a bad place came from. And so I think they get it. I think they're getting it. I think kids are getting smarter about it, but you still need to be on them. And Shenandoah and Meadowbrook have been very receptive to letting us in and letting us do stuff.
You know, when they were recording the PSAs, they were wonderful, and they really, and these were younger kids, they were in 8th grade, 7th, 8th grade. And you know, they can be a little silly, but they took it very seriously. They really seemed to understand the seriousness of it. So, yes.
I wonder if the girl who's feeling left out suddenly gets attention from the guy in the shopping mall and then gets some phone calls, if she wouldn't brag to the other kids that she'd met this person, and that's how the other kids could help.
Intervene.
Well, yeah, I think that probably happens, but then you go back to the old adage that the less someone wants you around someone, the more likely you are to go to them. You know, it's like, don't ever tell your kid you don't like their girlfriend or their boyfriend. So I wonder, because they tend to defend them. They tend to, it's just like when you rescue the girls and you attempt to make them realize they're victims of trafficking, they defend their trafficker because they're their world. You know, they buy them gifts, they take them places, they, you know, fancy clothes. And so they don't really hear when people are saying this shouldn't be happening. So it's scary. Like I said, my kid doesn't have a chance.
What percentage of recruitment for human traffic, for sex trafficking is over the internet, and how has that changed or is changing?
I can't give you a specific percentage. I will tell you it's changed in that, like, that Craigslist used to be the big one, and Craigslist still has some, but they've really cracked down. The biggest right now, and please don't go check this page out because you will probably get a ding on your computer, Backpage.com. Backpage.com is just a mecca of human trafficking. And a lot of times when parents, their kids will go missing, they will find them on there. They take photos of them and they put them on there, and many parents will be like, oh my God, there's my daughter, there's my son. But they move so much that it's just hard to catch up with them and get them rescued. There's also what they call the dark web. A couple years ago, we did a training, that might have been just last year, did a training on the other side of town, and we had some folks from across the state come in and do a regional training. And there was a woman who had been a victim of human trafficking. And she spoke of now that there is dark web. And what it is once someone gets into the system and gets to know a victim, they basically get like a PIN code. And then you have to get a referral and get your hands on that PIN code in order to go to the dark web and log into that PIN code, and then it opens you up to schedule appointments with this victim. And so it's now done all on this referral source, so it's making it very, very difficult for law enforcement because they can't get their hands, and if they get their hands on a PIN code, it's been changed. But so now it's moving to this online system, but it's all based on referral. And so it's getting much more difficult to track. But that's terrifying. But there is still a lot of movement on the internet. How?
I think part of the reason for the upsurge in sex trafficking, at least, is due to the internet?
I don't know, you know.
Or is there an upsurge? Is that what you're saying?
I think they're finding that it's getting harder and harder to traffic drugs.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is it's easier for them. Mm-hmm. They can make more money because they don't have to replenish their supply. Mm-hmm. And it is fairly new, so there's not as much law enforcement around it. It's changing, but I think that's what it is.
I always try.
Harder and harder to traffic drugs.
I always try to gauge, when you talk about there being an upswing, I always have to balance it with, it may be that there seems to be an upswing, but we're also drawing so much awareness to it. You know, like with mental health, you know, my mental health people back there, you know, when you look at the 2020 Healthy People goals, and one of them is to reduce mental health, but unfortunately it went up. Well, we're making awareness to it. So is there going to be an increase because you're bringing awareness to it and people are seeking services? So I don't know if the upswing is because of the internet or because we're educating, because we've taken on rescuing people. I don't know if that's a reason for an increase.
So Jen has information out on the table. Everyone can come in, take whatever they would like.
I'm standing this close to Stephanie because she's got the microphone on, so don't think I'm just getting weird standing next to her.
All right.
But, you know, these are, like I said earlier, it's a shame it's the holidays and we're having this discussion, but I think this is probably just going to be the first of many. We need to get more people in the discussion and have more awareness. This is no different than the difficulty we've gone through with talking about drugs. This is no different than that. We need to encourage the school systems to let you get in and talk to them. I think we all probably realize...
Teachers are trained, but it's hard to get to the students. All teachers have to be trained just like the salons.
Unfortunately today we're finding there are more and more tough discussions that communities need to have. So we'll continue to try to make those discussions available to our chamber members and the general public. But we hope that by this being broadcast on local TV for a couple weeks, we'll get some more awareness that way also. If there are no more questions, I will announce that in January, and I think it's the 4th, Dale Arnold from the Farm Bureau is going to be speaking to us about pipelines and the involvement with the gas and oil. And oil is up to $50 a barrel, and that's a good thing. So we're looking at that industry coming back to a certain degree. And then in February, Mike and Mary King are going to be coming to talk about the new Guernsey power station that's being built down in Buffalo. So we've got some great meetings coming up ahead, and so we encourage you to come to those. Thank you very much for coming. Happy holidays after this horrible discussion, but happy holidays, and we'll see you in January.
February 2nd is Ohio's statewide Human Trafficking Day. They do an event on the State House lawn, and then for the first time this year on February 3rd, they're having a youth summit. And so Thursday is the Human Trafficking Day on the state lawn, and then on Friday they're doing an initiative to educate and train our youth across the state.
Great.
So those will both take place in...
You know, there's
I don't know.
awareness and for autism.
Everything they give us is red and black, so I don't know. I don't know, but yeah, February will be February 2nd and February 3rd are the Human Trafficking Days in Ohio.
Oh, another question.
Do you know if Muskingum County United Way has a child advocacy council?
Muskingum County does not have a CAC. They are in the beginning stages. I've met with them twice. They are in the beginning stages of developing a CAC. Right now, they refer everything to Children Nationwide, Nationwide's children. So
Okay.
any resources, you could come through us or you could go through them. So.
Thank you, everyone. Happy holidays.